Interpretations medicine is a generic way fully act might not be to defend that wait one sec. That member nations of the World Trade Organization ought to reduce potential protections for subset of medicines. That's evil. 19. Gender resolution cannot be affirmed by societies particularly interested. First, ask yourself whether college and universities are not considered generalized sets. Therefore, college and universities are not considered generalized sets of valid reference. Second, college and university fails the upward entitlement test. College and university fails the average quantification. Fourth is unlikely the top committee would have written the resolution of the existential interpretation. The committee is not really a resolution for national circuit for the national circuit, and it applies to medicines when it's upward entitlement test. So entitlement test because saying that nations ought to reduce IPV for one medicine not until then the nations ought to reduce IPV for all medicines. Choose averages use that usually to the resolution doesn't substantially change its meaning because the reduction is universal and permanent. But next semantics that way one is the use of the basic ad burden. They are agreed to debate the topic as a one they came here and to be jurisdiction. You can't put that. They haven't heard the resolution. C is only 60 point we know the radical internals internally to engage with. There's no reason to use granted the debaters aren't prepared to defend it. And you should put negative on limits if comments have if a kind of for that medicines like limited topics and methods obscure apps the next will have the limits are typical ad burden ad potential decision if I correctly forgoing the topic and the 1 or 3 checks picks what affluence or word specification of words and negative bad picks that doesn't clash and produce stale debates and be even if pressing the affluent check against both picks while hedge and neck will have case specific offense. No offense either picks or reasons fights in theory. Checks where you don't need spec for picks or any reason you don't need spec for no reasons doesn't justify attributes. You can't just because I could read the picks or operating and affluence to be reasons themselves and there's over 20,000 assets FDA 1118 is over 20,000 percent drug products 300 biologics and 2 is ground respect towards an excellent innovation that rely on reducing IP for all medicine because individual medicine affects the pharmaceutical products industry broadly. This means there's a specific ass and very TVS as you can read. The advantages for his interpretation, the second of interpretation marijuana is in a medicine that's mostly 20. Marijuana is not medical drugs linked to cannabis a family that presents 60 different cannabinoid substances more than 880 biologically active compounds and FDA CDC definitions prove that CDC 18. It's marijuana said there is enough research to plant tree condition. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration does not recognize or approve marijuana as medicine in violation of the resolution of reductions IP protection of medicines, the affluence future patents for cannabis derived products and but negative limits to expanded definition of medicine to anything can be used in medical settings results in negative cases to prep for anything. Everything when you have a cumulative upgrading sentence comes become topical at best or extradition the extra cannabis and usually medicinal. It also has medicinal uses that reduces recreational marijuana patents too, which isn't topical and exposes limits. That way he always one of our theories of prior question to engagement with the F because you choose not to be topical and lexically prior and always on all your shows also in theory because we can't evaluate what you receive your happens for a next place. Also is an argument F has infinite preference just by issue or the third F interpretation reducing the permanent reductions interesting for waiver system that's Reynolds 59. The section that reduces non-state temporary percentage that the dictionary meaning of the word is diminished the word reducing indicates permanency and it's temporary we read with this Meredith 21 the temporary referring to like relevant intellectual IP and context in a vacuum is a useless guidance is worth of contextually to ways to define based on function only based on return topic actually made implementation of planets for the 180 solves the evidence as well as the direction made of the topics and anything as well as the 1 AR to recontextualize with the planets and 14 180 predict 1 infinite and 1 AR spin so not time for the evidence we both for negligence and negligence use under any infinite and for any number of conditions levels after every plan because either temporary for each should be the best criteria and must for every apple avoid core topic discussion on reduction based insights and technologic form of innovation of biotech and by the TVA self permanently reducing new patents and paradigm issues 8 point topic has dropped the duties fundamental based on debatability and 2 scripting interest 1 point have topic is the no question can be reasonably topical and 2 reasonable and infinite advice and research judgment intervention and research bottom question argumentation and CNO argument 1 point first and 1 to go on all day with skill substance education 2 versus basis the 1 is will purposely be received and from theory logically shouldn't win for not being received reject 1 theory 8.76 times 2 weeks advice I don't have a theory now to respond which allows for to check population 3.1 theory see that because they have 2 area technology 1 and infinite abuse because everyone's 8 points back so you can just free up the times in the 1 AC and 3 point is functional limits 1 AC is only 7 minutes long and the fourth the member nations of the World Trade Organization to enter a prior binding consultation with the World Trade Organization over delaying intellectual property protections for cannabis member nations will support the proposal and adopt the results of consultation and the WHO says that they increase the availability of generics and limiting trips that's I-103 the 2 resolutions they need to increase the availability of generic drugs and evaluate drugs and access to drugs and consultation drugs law leadership authority and affiliation among member states which are key to WHO legitimacy that's fascinating all 15 members of the WHO need to lead us to harmonize with activities and set priorities that reaches with routine power blocks the states recognize the health of their citizens depend on the WHO to display a strong and encourage cooperation the WHO can actually lead us members act as shareholders for voting sovereignty for the global public good that will not happen unless members granted authority and the WHO is credible to do so first only international institutions that can disperse information to global public health and public-private cooperation as we're good 20 the WHO has any sorts of world they've also been 3 new surrounding disease and warming whatever opportunities for passages we will coordinate speech research and drugs safety vaccine development surveillance virus shaming it is collaborating with private sector organizations to advance research and R&D improving their access our IHR focus on detecting system and reporting local rights IHR we're not reading the rest of the cards on the counterplan on the case page on the first on the case page first on this like biodiversity argument 1 it's about crops and they don't go away also farmers can still use it for recreational use. There's no reason why medical facilities are key. Also on the impact level, no time frame, but they don't tell you how long it needs to happen. They say it's a question of probability, but no chain reactions. Also for diversity, which is also planning use chains, which means it turns the one I see this food security. No time frame. They don't tell you how long this takes to happen. It's not key, or weed is not key. Weed is not key to food security. And two, your evidence says that people aren't starving now, which means there's no inherency to the impact. But then also you said that COVID, countries don't have access to food. These are low income countries. COVID-19 says that a war happens if by the things a global hegemon like the U.S. and Russia not having food, which isn't the case. And then on the cars one, on monopolies one, big harm of patent monopolies that failed. Their final example proves the patents or indefinitely banned. That's Reuters. 19. Revoked all foreign patent requests for marijuana. Government signed an executive order enabling the permanent intellectual property to revoke all pending patents and involve cannabis. And two, BARDA has no internal innovation in medical marijuana, specific to pharmacy being able to grow weed to sell it on medical research. And three, no effective marijuana innovation, not only types of weeds as terms of innovation arguments because our link is a reduction in IP equals innovation over all medicine due to fear spillover. And four, uniqueness. Biden won't legalize marijuana at a federal level. That's Kane 21. Biden's campaign saw rolled back years of progress. Biden campaigns were rejecting meaningful cannabis policy reform. Biden's overheard of marijuana as the first champion for mass incarceration of 2020. Tennessee said, I think legalization is a mistake. And one, American marijuana is almost opioid reverse. The only analyzed restriction that probably one AC isolates is the overuse of illegal drugs. That's Ferrazzi. 20. 6 marijuana for medical purposes. 23% more deaths on opioid overdose when they looked over a longer period of time. We do be cautionary about inferring cause and effect is made to be made all ways possible solutions. Either reverse was extended the analysis, cut the card analysis, and two, turn marijuana increase the opioid as HPFF 15. Marijuana is increase the risk of substance opioid dependence, early initiation of drug use crimes of ready for enhanced response to other drugs later like Comfrey and Humphrey show the heightened risk of perception of opioid mysteries on medical marijuana users. Nationally represented data twice the risk of perception of opioid mysteries and not internally between moral collateral opiates are not nerve agents. There's no internal chemical weapons or ban erosion or chemical weapons use. And four, like 20 and 20 between overrestriction of opioids and abuse of which more worse like carfentanil. They assume a causal relationship, but smoking weed is not the same as shooting heroin. Also, 5, impact zero risk. Or when I see roll card isolates, one see over carfentanil is a chemical weapon. Your when I see equivalents, but nerve agents a chemical fast, which isn't the same thing. You should reject it on face. 6, medical marijuana is your turn higher risk of addiction and more gateway to drugs, which is turn 6. That's mostly 20. Cannabinoids may 100% is over suffering anxiety, negative when THC can cause psychosis and marijuana induced chronically correlated with poor mental health and low resilience. Other associations feel gateway to hard drugs and locally made marijuana can be less with fentanyl additions models. It could be worse than opioids to availability on the solvency. Want to see counterplan absolutely. You can see the shorting patent windows is compensated by increasing profitability with abstinence, but why not increasing access by lowering prices? And two, the hardest is not saying the delay enforcement causes innovation. That is advice of defining legal loopholes and shutting down business. That's very cut. Counter 20 factors when you're using technology under road to be enforceable paths. How Korean knows closer to establish how systems and innovate their own means. You stopped at means.
Cross.
Yeah, I'm good.
Sure. What's your definition of a medicine?
We just say that marijuana isn't a medicine. I guess we don't read when and see evidence of what constitutes a medicine.
Well, then obviously the shell's nonsense because it doesn't provide a predictable stasis point for what is topical. If I wanted to write a topical laugh, what criteria would I have to meet?
Okay, I don't think that's a reason to sort of reject the shell. Just because we don't provide a definition of a medicine doesn't mean that you can sort of arbitrarily get away with doing anything you want. Our interpretation is that marijuana isn't a medicine. First of all, it doesn't sort of we would sort of say the CDC evidence seems to say that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration doesn't recognize it as a medicine. That could sort of maybe assume that the Food and Drug Administration, whatever they classify as a medicine, is our definition of a medicine, which marijuana is not. That isn't a reason to reject the shell. It's just a reason why you're not topical.
Okay, that's fine. I guess the counterplan. So you didn't read the WHO diplomacy solves great power conflict, right? But you read everything other than that.
Yeah, we read everything from the Merck gut evidence, and then we didn't read the millet and all the other stuff.
You didn't read millet.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess what diseases or pandemics are coming now? Where have you read uniqueness evidence?
Sure. Our uniqueness evidence sort of doesn't isolate that there's a disease coming now and that the counterplan solves that, but rather that the WHO it's just there's just a net benefit than doing the AF, which is just they sort of have standardized global public health. There's public-private cooperation, which probably solves your AF better because you talk about things like the big pharma industry and things like food.
Sure, I guess that's fine. And
your biodiversity, and not your biodiversity, your bioterror impact, which are bioweapons, which cause disease, probably would also just solve that.
Okay, why does marijuana increase opioid use?
That was the Cardon case, right?
We'll explain the worms, yeah.
Sure. So the HPF evidence does takes into account some data. It seems to talk about how people who use prescription opioids, or actually people who use marijuana, are twice as more likely to use prescription opioids, which means that after the 1AC passes and more people are reliant on marijuana, that incentivizes people to sort of go out and go buy illegal opioids or things that are like probably not good for them.
I guess like what's the sample size for this sort of polling? It says nationally representative data.
Sure. I mean, like we don't sort of like know in the like I guess the what the polling size is. They take into account like some data that was probably given by like the FDA or whatever like polling was done on that and just did a study off of it.
Okay, that's fine. I guess the like more on the WTO shell, this sort of say yes evidence. The WTO adopted a sort of distinct resolution a while ago. Actually, whatever, that's right. I'll start that. What were your answers to the biodiversity scenario other than it's about crops?
The biodiversity, yeah. So sure, one is that like there's no reason why farmers would sort of spill over. Two, that it's about crops, and three, that there's just sort of like what was it? Oh, like there's no like time frame because it's just like you say it's probabilistic, but it's probably just like linear. And then also like you disrupt food webs because you create new chains of like marijuana.
What was that last argument?
Like you create new strains, and you saying cross that like disrupting the the ecosystem is bad.
That's the counterplan.
Oh, condo.
Okay. Okay, 310 taken. The order is, I guess I'll send out the doc. But the order is going to be the shells in order, case, consult.
Oh, wait, so shells in order, then case, then consult.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. I'm good whenever.
Look, I just set up the doc, but.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't even like check. All right, 1 sec. Oh, did you send it on the email?
I was about to send it on the email chain, but then I just sort of like realized that the speech route probably makes more sense, so I will do that.
Yeah.
It's uploaded.
Okay, it's downloading. Give me 1 sec. Oh, it's at the bottom. Okay, 1 sec. Okay, I'm good whenever.
1 second. T-Shell's in order, case consult.
Yep.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, great. Anya, you good?
Yeah.
Interpretation of forming specialized subset managed subset to generic second alternate generic little to be judged true and if you reduce these go to with numbers 1% like current number able to place on controversial empirical levels level except judge generic statements indeed for lower reduce modifies the statement means generic matter any reduction of topicality debate solves opportunity with seeking to intuition to interpret the solution as specification of a critical interpretation based on pragmatic checks like caution learning solution debatability outweighs jurisdiction is nonsense and judgment for not too deaf multiple time without consequences one is clash force and the research release nuance based on the implication of the barriers IPP reduction is an IP is obviously distinct from cannabis to have no to the innovation applies to all pigs each medicines different purpose in IP production PDP are worse than planes next have generous like NCs and Ks have none versus pigs the sort of preemptive pigs theory doesn't check they can brute force their way to a victory and they'll always have some sort of case neck which means it's worse the terminal defense there are way more medicine pigs than assets most has with the distribution counterplan for over limits after recommend hundreds between case necks and case tail clash which link turns the effects on limit functional limits the generic checks often the advocates and heresy requires school IPP and small absolute case and C's health diplomacy innovation reasonability voting neg requires Africans themselves who's voting in T always the abuse that has to outweigh the vote abuse of voting on T medicines I mean cannabis is medicine that treats pain the alarm 19 makes people feel high CDP's treatment for epilepsy CHEC's multiple for pain, other purposes don't make it not like medicine, snorting nutmeg doesn't make it not a spice, and smoking weed doesn't make it not medicinal, counter interpretation medicines to prevent diagnosis or treatment medicine, the substitution prevention, diagnosis, treatment, or injury, skip the next definition, prefer topic education, definition of literature controversy is unique in the global cannabis legalization era towards inclusion because nobody's reading any aspect from the code on the topic 2 over limiting ask direct by hyperspecific case tag that was above, cross-apply functional limits and everything below the next show, I need delay, patent enforcement to the window of time which a patent can be enforced which reduces patent, IP production for preventing patents being applied for a certain period of time, counter interpretive reduce means to diminish, freedom 99 reduce means to diminish, prefer topic validity, and the nature of literature controversy unique to the way the cannabis legalization occurs, to debatability, all reductions to IP to temporal, since the IPs by definition only exist only for a time period, I the W2 COVID winter cross apply all of the standards from above, yes I get one year theory, infinite abuse, outweighs all of their standards, spikes, sort of spikes don't check back because they can't preempt every possible argument, conditionality, but your excuse, one excuse, one year strategy, and process across multiple different unique conditions, which assures class digital souls, all their offense they can kick unless we straight turn the net benefit, go to case. Restrain biodiversity to patents ensure that restrain biodiversity and low prices do not occur. That's key to not affecting local ecosystems due to being vulnerable to disease, and it's key to decreasing opioid prescriptions. I'm going for the two scenarios. The line on their specific arguments, they start evidence about crops. You obviously have to grow crops for medicinal purposes. They say time frame. No, all of their impacts are probabilistic. So ours, they say no spillover. They concede this can affect other ecosystems. They say it affects the ecosystem. No reason why multiple strains would do that. The sort of rest of the case argument, they say big farm fails in Thailand, or culinary evidence agrees, but it says Thailand's policies are in violation of TRIPS. So as soon as companies appeal, that means that example no one will apply. The Barnett is about medical weed. It says that weed is grown to sort of have medical weed be less expensive. They say we don't need multiple different types of meat. They concede the multiple strains allow individual growers to make their products cheaper. They say buying will legalize. We make a broader claim about countries, and Biden said it doesn't have complete power over legalization. They say increased opioid use is correlation, not causation, and it's about abusing prescriptions, not the total quantity of prescriptions. The sort of case term they read, the study is wrong. Paragraph after the court closed apathy for Rosie, given the public's accepted use of non-independent reliever, gives doctors better options. They also conceded a sort of a preempt in the 1AC. They say neuroterminal linked weapons. They conceded that larger quantities of carfentanil can be modified into nerve agents. They say Kellner decreases innovation. They haven't read a net benefit to innovation. Go to consult. Permutation to the counterplan consultation only Webster and result consult or delivery to permutation to the counterplan. They say yes, argument is not functionally competitive because the result in the plan functional combination is good if the counterplan result in the affects topic education prevents research in the intricacy of medical IPP. 3 perm do both with plan. Results when they say if they do when they say when they say yes, and the permutation also link if they say no. Case that weighs on magnitude limited intrinsic. Is good if it reflects actual policy making prevents artificial competition. They haven't read any impact that diseases are coming out or terminal impact to diseases, and they conceded defense in the Snyder evidence, which indicates that it's impossible for diseases to have all the naturally occurring traits that could allow them to cause extinction, which means any risk of a say no argument means you vote neg, and they haven't decisively want to say no argument. There's always risk because they haven't proven a policy is being passed now.
Okay. I'll start now. Oh, was the RVI, were the RVI arguments on the doc read?
No. Condo
No?
sandwiches
Okay.
and reject the team.
Okay, cool. And was the reasonability stuff read?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Oh, what was the thing for like the Biden stuff?
The argument was that our evidence talks about development and legalization across all countries, so one exception doesn't take out the advantage. 2, Biden doesn't have sole jurisdiction over
Okay,
legalization. It's a congressional question.
Yeah, I got that. Okay, that was time. The order is just going to be, I guess the offs. Actually first to counterplan T, then case.
Which T shell?
It's going to be the first one.
Meeple?
Yeah.
Okay. I am no cards, right?
No new cards.
Okay.
Okay, cool. We'll start, and on the counterplan, it'll first be like condo, obviously. Okay. Cool. We'll start. First on the counterplan, we're kicking, we're not going for it. One, we're responding to counter now. One is neck place. 8 point continue, do not try to because last night kick negative against F and infinite part of the neck. Can never because the alpha just dump off the single neglect for 4 minutes. The choice makes sense. Tune our section never happens. B point is ground countless and neglect. So test the F for multiple strikers are having go for every one of them, and the 2 in our ketogenic offense against the F because I wouldn't have enough time to defend them otherwise. 2 is rest of bodies uneconomies at any point becomes an even nervous voting choosing the F kills never on because I'll never have offense. By the end of the 1 year hours of instruction because you can overcome times here and ground by making better arguments. So you can never do anything with no risk issues. Hold on, behind your arguments. No strategy. One conditional obviously doesn't use strategy. You haven't proven a question of in-round abuse. Also, in-round abuse. Just what doesn't solve. You could sort of come with any arbitrary right line as your interpretation for dispo. That doesn't mean it's solved because you would just force a neg to do everything like straight in the counterplan, which means that it's only damning for the affirmative. For the affirmative doesn't resolve your impacts on the like T stuff. We're kicking the second, we're kicking the second and third shells. There were no RBI arguments made on this. So there's no independent offense for them. It's only on only on their cheat rate. Responding to their kind of our interpretation is that we can't that medicines are generic. We're clearly cannot defend memorization of the World Trade Organization ought to reduce intellectual protection over substantive medicines. We'll concede that pragmatics outweighs semantics. So we're clearly winning the pragmatics debate. We'll line by line your arguments here. One on clash. No, there's no. You don't incentivize clash because generics don't check. We've proven that uniquely in the context of the topic that there are multiple things that you could be specifying specifically medicines. We don't force you to go in depth with nuances because IP laws affect every single thing, which means there isn't a core set that we can read because you could just no link out of it, which means that things like generics don't check, which means that you don't incentivize clash. Also, generics are bad because you incentivize the same stale arguments, which doesn't incentivize key in depth of clash of specific nuances of what the resolution is. 2 is on your after arguments. Know that you still have multiple things. So you can read about how you can specify certain IP protection. You can specify certain countries. We only say that you can't specify things like medicines, which means you still get you on your terminal defense arguments on the picks arguments. You conceded almost all the preemptive picks that wing arguments. So we'll do them here. Picks aren't an argument. T1 F limits are worse. A point specification forces neck to bet neck but doesn't clash and produce still debates. And B point infinite crimes. The F can check against picks. So neck will have case specific offense. And 2 is an offense. Either picks or abusive and spikes in theory and serious. Or you don't need picks or abusive. You don't need spike. You say spikes on check. But no, yes they do because you can sort of preempt general things like theory arguments, which are paradigm issues. 3 potential abuse doesn't identify abuse, which means that you can read picks. Also 4 research written as a generic case and we answer with one all medicine key warrant, but each plan requires a compliant and new case research to win, which proves why generics don't check or why functional limits doesn't check because we don't have generics to respond to them. Functional limits also don't check because you can still specify things like specific medicines. Even if there are 20,000 medicines, there's still probably hundreds of them that you could be specifying, like things like insulin, which we don't have a specific case. Let's do that. Outweighs on education because it gets into next into sort of explosive overexposed limits. Overexposed limits. Over limiting is over limiting outweighs under limiting is over limiting exposed sort of exposed to under limiting outweighs overloading because you explode the neck prep burden, which always puts us in a position we might not be able to respond to your burden, which means you can't engage in the 1AC and sort of do things like class and education, which turns all of your education off. Education comes before fairness because education is constitutive of debate. It's the only reason why schools might into that. The only things you sort of get out of it, the only reason things you get out of it, you don't remember which rounds you won and lost. Rather, the educational value you get from which is that education comes before fairness. In fact, you didn't do that way in the 1 year, so we'll do it for you. Education comes before all your education comes before all of your impacts, all your linguistic intuitions and your foreign concealing arguments don't matter since you conceded that pragmatic sometimes we won why picks are an argument. Picks are an argument on T, which means you can't go for the 2 error. Why that you sort of explode the neck prep uniquely in the context of this topic. It isn't sort of a generic argument. So it isn't a sort of generic argument. But why specifically in this topic you explode the neck prep and we don't have things like generics to outweigh, which obviously hurts the negative and it disincentivizes things like clash, which obviously things like clash, which hurts education on the 1AC proper on the 1AC or top level to all of your arguments. There's no time frame or probability to all of them. First on your biodiversity. There's no bright line as to how much biodiversity needs to decrease for your impacts to have. You say it's probabilistic, but there is no probability since your card is sort of data from 2016, but also that too that we ask you in cross-links about how biodiversity happens to disrupting the food system by disrupting the food ecosystem with costings of biodiversity. Obviously, introducing new strains by farmers it sort of disrupts the ecosystem. That was the evidence you read. Evidence you read that says why biodiversity gets worse is because it changes in the ecosystem. Here, when I see advocates that you say that no, you don't incentivize planting of it, but yes, you do. That is the argument. Your argument is that you're planting new strains of medical marijuana, which would hurt biodiversity, which means your argument is like sufficiently turned. Your response here was pretty bad. But then on this food insecurity, there is sort of no connection between the internal link and the impact card. The internal link card talks about how there is no sort of food insecurity now, which means you're not winning a time frame question because you say that COVID isn't affecting food. We asked that question across the board, and we asked you what countries are being affected by food insecurity. You say low-income countries like things like Kenya and South Africa. Your impact evidence talks about how war would wage out in food insecurity if hegemons like Russia, China, and the U.S. were to have food insecurity. Since they do not have food insecurity right now, which is the evidence you read before, that means that there is no linkage of the impact, which means there is no probability. Since you didn't go for the terrorism impact, you conceded all the offensive defense on it, which means that the only arguments you can go for are these two, which you've already proven where there is no probability, there is no time frame, which means there is no weighing mechanism, and weighing mechanism, which is why the act literally does not do anything, or at worst makes a biodiversity impact for it. It doesn't solve things like food security. They haven't outlined a specific reason why each scenario solves or outweighs on time frame. You should hold them to the line of giving you a time when their impacts are going to happen. They'll try to cup in the 200 grandstand about how the act is try or die, but clearly it isn't, because there is no trying or dying, because it hasn't happened anyway. Your evidence is pretty outdated. And there's missing a bunch of internal links. So we already isolated the 1AC that went conceded in the 1AR. The round breaks down really, really easily. They mishandled the T debate. They're not winning picks. We concede pragmatics outweighs. We outweigh on like things like clash and education. Education is a voter on the 1AC. There's no probability or time frame. They're missing a bunch of internal links that went conceded in the 1AR. We've explained it for you. You can easily vote negative on T.
50 seconds?
I think so.
Case T. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Lowering weed IPR lowers cost and increases access, directly trades off with the opioid epidemic, which means less weaponized fentanyl has the risk of causing escalation to and our needs to flow. We clearly answered their defense to the terrorism scenario. That's why we were specifically talking about carfentanil on the case page and explaining why opioids consumed by the masses can be directly weaponized, asserting that there were a bunch of drop arguments as one, and assertion we answered them in two. Don't shadow extend anything, even if you think that they drop them, because that would be judgment to mention. We'll concede there's no impact in either of the other two scenarios, which means the terms don't matter. Good and evil. Going for the clash standard, specifying medicines is predictable and preserves nuanced clash. Different medicines have drastically different IPP. COVID asks justify reduction to distribute vaccines worldwide. Our WEED app doesn't care about distribution. It reduces IP to preserve market competition and innovation, while indigenous knowledge apps might reduce IP in order to prevent distribution of their medicines. There are not many apps that justify reduction for fundamentally different reasons, because apps like insulin or HIV are also all about access and distribution, lose to the same arguments that COVID loses to, which means maybe 5 or 6 apps exist that require fundamentally distinct preps, which solves limits, but each app occupies a fundamentally distinct place in the literature and has very different core negative ground. Their interpretation encourages the endless recycling of generic neg arguments like innovation, distribution, and compulsory licensing that are designed to answer the COVID app and have links to HORES, but site having nothing to do with a medicine-specific advantage. The TVA would be awful. 1, it wasn't extended, but 2, it would result in 2 ships passing in the night because the NC isn't indexed to the app at all, and HORES advantages have to be so ridiculously broad that they can't capitalize on any core controversy the literature. Yes, this might mean the negative need 3 case negatives instead of 1, but forcing the negative to do that marginal additional research increases the quality of in-round clash so exponentially because debates actually reflect nuanced controversies, will concede all of their education away. It directly sort of flows out. Our impact categorically outweighs their limits argument because predictable limits should outweigh limits. It controls what we think we have to prep, even if they result in less asks, if they are not the asks that people think they'll have to debate against when they open Wikipedia or when they open Google Scholar. For instance, the insulin app, and obviously it is not a predictable stasis point for conducting rounds. I'll answer a couple of their arguments on Clash right now. One, they say generics don't check because there are way too many unlimited topics. This presupposes that they answer our arguments about generics and functional limits. One, we have impact showing the idea that they have to be generics. They do not have to be generic. Rather, they should be cutting specific case next to each of the relatively small quantity of apps. They say we can still specify a lot of things. Our argument is that things like types of IPP in countries is not where the real mechanism and literature differences exist, which means they would not access the same clash benefits as the affirmative. Their limits arguments, functional limits solves the vast majority of it. Sure, they illustrated that 20,000 possible apps could exist, but ask yourself, if that was the case, then why have all but 2 competent teams only read the COVID affirmative? Is because there was a relatively limited quantity of apps that are reflected sort of in the literature, and it was sort of reflected in the literature. The vast majority of them used the same sort of types of arguments, i.e. distribution. That sort of work was all done above, which means it is incredibly realistic to expect the negative to prep against a reasonable quantity of affirmatives.
A good debate.
Good debate.